Good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to this online symposium, Taking Back Housing. This is a day organized by the Independent School for the City and the International Newtown Institute, both here in Rotterdam. My name is Michelle Provoost, and I'm the director of INTI and member of the Dean team at the School for the City. And it's my pleasure to guide you through the various presentations and conversations that we will be having today. Unfortunately, Charlie Fiedel-Dop, who was looking forward to being the moderator today, couldn't be here because she had to wait for the results of a corona test, which will hopefully be negative. So if you're watching Charlie, we wish you a speedy recovery. So today you will have to make do with me and my colleagues of the school, starting with Wouter van Stiphout sitting here next to me. By bringing together examples and experts from the Netherlands and abroad, we will discuss the challenges and the possibilities for alternative housing projects that challenge the conventional planning methods. How can we help to democratize the way we organize our housing, and why is that so important to do? Let me try to answer this question in a few points. In the first place, because of the skyrocketing costs of housing. While city centers all over the world have become increasingly popular for living, working and tourism, housing has become scarce and real estate prices have become unreal. In most Western capitals, be it Paris, London or Amsterdam, it has become extremely difficult to find an affordable house. And now even Rotterdam, until a few years ago known as a haven for cheap spaces to live and work, is becoming too expensive for people with a modest or even with a middle income. Second, in the second place, because our housing production has been hijacked by large market parties. And this results from a conscious political choice to liberalize the housing market some 3 decades ago. And by now, the laws of the market are seen as a force of nature, like something which cannot be altered. And the neoliberal policy has left housing corporations paralyzed and curtailed their possibilities to invest. This has led to a structural shortage of affordable housing, especially in the city centers. In the third place, because also other parties are unable to enter in the housing production, which is defined by the laws and the money of the highest bidder. Recently, a large number of new, smaller parties are trying to realize their projects. Housing cooperatives, do-it-yourselfers, former squatters, developing architects, they all try to gain development rights and a place at the table. These projects radically challenge conventional planning methods. However, there are many obstacles to overcome, mostly in the institutional unwillingness or inability to deal with non-professionals or with a not-for-profit approach. In the fourth place, and then I'll stop, it is a shame that the Netherlands have built their reputation in the 20th century as a country providing high quality and beautifully designed, rent-controlled social housing. But recently, this tradition is forgotten. Both the structures to design and realize it, and the culture and mentality to value its meaning, they have gone. Social housing, or affordable rentals, are now seen to be for losers. With the growing housing prices, this leads to growing inequality and a growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. You can work all day long, every day, but if you own a house, it will make more money than you do. This is what we learned from, for instance, Piketty. The increase in value of our houses is the pillar under many a household. Our economy is based on the idea of real estate as an object of speculation. But should it even be a commodity that can be speculated with? Should it even be a product to be bought and sold on the market? This may sound radical, yet later on we will see how in Germany thousands of people live in collective buildings which have effectively been taken out of the market. And another speaker will explain how in Zurich hundreds of buildings have been realized for middle-class families by thriving, not-for-profit housing corporations. So it is possible. Yet in the Netherlands and many other countries, these kind of projects are not thriving yet. Today, we will examine independent housing cooperatives in the Netherlands, investigating what makes it so difficult to realize these alternative self-built projects. And during this day, we will try to provide answers to questions such as, what is needed for the future implementation of self-organized housing plans? And who and what needs to change? What organizational and policy transformations are needed? With the contributions of residents, architects, activists and policymakers, we will analyze and question the standard working methods and hope to stimulate new developments and experiments. And last but not least, this is also the International Newtown Day 2020, the yearly event of the International Newtown Institute. In fact, this is the follow-up to a similar event which we organized on the invitation of Milton Keynes in 2019. I think the topic of taking back housing is especially relevant for new towns because these are cities that have been planned completely top-down and where housing was originally completely built by the city council and by now completely depends on market parties. And to increase a healthy diversity, these new towns are in need of alternatives. Almere shows that there is a desire among the residents for self-building, which the local governments should learn to accommodate. Of course, the setting of the International Newtown Day is a bit different than in other years, but we are glad that we can have this event anyways and don't have to postpone it like so many other things. So, in this first hour, we will have two distinguished guests, Peter Kuenzli and Maarten van Poelgeest, who will reflect on the question of this session: what are housing cooperations and why do we need more democratic forms of housing? And they will paint the background and the broader picture of the need for democratization of the housing market, rooted in history but also giving ways into the future. And I'm happy to invite as our first speaker Peter Kuenzli. He was the director of the Municipal Housing Corporation in Rotterdam, project leader for the reconstruction of Roombeek in Enschede, all self-built houses. And he is presently a member of the board at the Rotterdamse Woongemeenschap, which strives to erect a collective, a housing cooperative in Rotterdam. He has experience of more than 3 decades in strategic urban planning and project management. And he's joining us from, I think, his own collective in the nature area of the Betuwe, where they, well, it has all the advantages of the countryside, but not the technical advantages. So maybe the image is somewhat disturbed sometimes, but we can hear you quite well. Welcome, Peter.
Yeah.
And I would like to give you the stage.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Especially a warm welcome to Richard Heim. He worked decennia for the city of Zurich, and Nathalie Schaller of the Mietbouwcentrale in München. They were both of great help the last years in our efforts to make a new housing cooperative in Rotterdam. My lecture is about the provision of affordable housing because of my concern of the housing situation of low and middle income households in the cities in the Netherlands. In 1983, the Netherlands got a new constitution in which the main assets of the welfare state were formalized. And the sheet will show that also housing was since then one of the concerns of central government. I'll wait for the first sheet now. Mike, can you put it on the screen?
Yeah, we can see it now. The first.
Yeah, you can see it now. All right. In 2020, we are in the Netherlands in the middle of a great housing crisis for low and middle income households and families. Taking back housing is a very urgent message. How come? What should be the contribution of housing cooperatives to solve this crisis? What can we learn from the experiences and policies in other countries? If you should compare the housing situation in the Netherlands with other countries in 1990, we should be among the top 5 in the world in terms of availability, affordability, and quality. 55% of all houses in the Netherlands belonged to housing associations. 30 years of urban renewal had a huge and positive impact on the quality and diversity of our cities. Income-bound subsidies of the state, individuele huursubsidie, made good quality social housing affordable even for the lowest income groups. This had a long tradition that started in 1901 when Liberals and Christian Democrat parties brought a new housing law to Parliament under the pressure of fast-growing cities and dangerous diseases because of the bad and overcrowded housing circumstances in the city. This housing law, Woningwet of 1901, stimulated the founding of private housing associations and foundations for the realization and management of state-funded housing for lower and middle-income households. The big housing boom of the 20s, but also the rebuilding and the reconstruction of our cities after World War II were only possible with an enormous effort of the planning authorities and the state aid for housing associations and municipal housing corporations in big cities. In my lecture, I will use the Dutch word woningcorporatie, for the housing associations. Also because it is such a very Dutch kind of institute. It is private, but under more or less public control and with a public goal. The goal to provide affordable housing for the people, volk, at least. And this was the goal till 2015 when the housing law was amended. The housing situation has dramatically changed the past 30 years. Step by step, Dutch governments followed a neoliberal agenda. It was never explained that way, always motivated by necessity in terms of state budget and the changing housing market conditions. The promise was that more competition on a free market should benefit renters and buyers with better houses, better services, and lower prices. A long series of interventions took place since a new housing strategy was presented by the Minister of Housing, Ineas Heerma, on the 27th of April in 1989. Volkshuisvesting in de jaren 90, the policy document was called. And this document was accepted in Parliament. The ties between the woningcorporaties and the state were cut. The net present value of all state loans and the total sum of all in the future guaranteed subsidies for this housing stock were paid off in one big sum. From that moment on, the woningcorporaties had to take care for their financing and profit and loss accounts themselves. The main instrument to manage the risk involved were, of course, the rent incomes. The big municipal housing corporations in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Utrecht, Den Haag, and lots of other cities in the Netherlands were privatized. All obstacles for the selling of the social housing stock were taken away. Deregulation of rent protection and rent pricing. Tax stimulation of the development of owner-occupied housing, and decentralization of urban housing planning, and eventually the shutdown of the Department of Urban Planning, Housing and Environment in 2013. Freed of their ties with and the strict control of government, a process of scaling up started in the housing sector. Formerly, nearly every city in the Netherlands had at least 3 woningcorporaties. Each group in the Dutch society had its own. socialists, Catholics, Protestants, liberals. At this moment, there are less woningcorporaties left than we have municipalities. No real competitions, more a kind of monopoly in which municipalities and woningcorporaties do their best to maintain a good relation because they need each other. In many cities and neighborhoods of the big cities, there is only one party left that could deliver you a social rent apartment or detached house, and woningcorporaties are the main owner of land and potential building sites in our big cities. Put a beggar on a horseback and he'll ride to the devil. Unfortunately, a few dozen woningcorporaties did. And Parliament took back control with a Parliament inquiry on all the scandals. In 2015, a new housing law was accepted by a vast majority in the House of Commons, our Tweede Kamer. And this law was the final blow of 30 years of liberalization. From that moment on, woningcorporaties could rent out their houses only to low-income households. Their activities in urban renewal and reconstruction schemes were severely limited. Development of mixed housing schemes were not allowed any longer. This would be the exclusively playing field of free market parties and investors, unless these parties were unwilling to do so. And because the state budget was in trouble and the public opinion was not in favor of the woningcorporaties any longer, there came a special tax for woningcorporaties, the verhuurdersheffing. At this moment, 1.7 billion euros each year, summing up for nearly 2 months' rent income each year, is going from the woningcorporaties to the state as a tax. It was no problem in the opinion of government. In their opinion, woningcorporaties were extremely rich, and if money was needed, more houses could be sold. So long, my very short summing up the recent history of the housing policy in the Netherlands. There are many similarities with policies in the United Kingdom, Germany, Belgium, and the Scandinavian countries. The Chicago School of Economics was king. The liberal and Atlantic view leading, and in a slightly less radical way, the Western European countries followed Reagan and Thatcher. I am working in the field of social and urban renewal now for more than 50 years. I must admit that I also thought for quite some time that the after-war welfare state should be reformed and that more individual and institutional responsibility and a more focused public role would help to adjust to a more diverse society and more diversity in demands. And I did not see for quite some time the agenda behind, which is also a right-wing political agenda. Owners tend to have a more right-wing vote. Deregulation and privatization of the housing market is in favor of the big international investment firms and the financiation of the housing. Housing has become an asset instead of a comfortable and stable home that every household needs. I woke up with the parliamentary inquiry. Politics were swayed by the issue of the day, the booming incomes of general directors after privatization, an expensive Maserati, corruption in land transaction and financial transactions, a misguided project with a well-known cruise ship, and of course a huge scandal with Vestia, a big woningcorporatie that speculated with swaps and lost 3 billion euros. Losses that had to be paid for 700 million by the Solidarity Fund of the woningcorporatie sector. But I knew that 90% of the woningcorporaties were doing a perfect job, and as before with a sense of social responsibility. Many splendid achievements in the area development should not be possible any longer at the restrictions that were made. Prize-winning area development in Roombeek is a good example. It got worse the last years. In the 80s, low-income families would spend 10% of their net income on rent, 10%. Irma was not right when he presented his policy in the 90s. He was warned by Johan Konijn, still one of our economic opinion makers on housing. Johan Konijn predicted in 1989 that 46 of all renters would pay 20% on rent of their income in 2000. In 2020, renters pay 38% of their net income on rent in average in the Netherlands. In the private rent market, we see even higher ratios. More than 1 million people in the Netherlands live on state benefits that did not follow inflation. All these people grew poorer all the time. People that have no real perspective are more and more concentrated in social housing complexes. Problem areas and people with a lot of problems keep each other in a tight grip, as former Secretary of Housing Marcel van Dam described in his book Niemandsland, Nobody's Country, in 2009. There are at this moment alarming research results on health situation of low-income groups. The housing situation of the lower income households is deteriorating every year. Waiting times for a social house is rising till 7, 8, 9, 10 years. The housing stock of housing associations went down from 55% in the 90s to 30% now. The number of new built social housing is on a long time low level because of lack of investment possibilities. In the Netherlands, we have 40,000 people that are homeless. An unknown number of people live in recreation parks, never meant for permanent housing. We have 400,000 labor migrants living in 19th century conditions with 19th century health risks. Middle-class people cannot apply for a social house since the new housing law and are confronted with the fast rising of rent prices per square meter per month. 16 euros per square meter per month, 18, 20. In Amsterdam, it's 24 at this moment. And then where does this process end? This process drives up housing prices in such a speed that large part of middle-income households cannot afford to rent a good house. Their income is not high enough to buy a house in the big cities either. The effect is that many households have to live in smaller houses. In smaller houses where each member of the household does not have their own place to work, relax or sleep. And COVID made us aware of how important this is still. The only other option the market offers is to leave the city where you live and where you have your social network. Move to the suburbs and try to buy a detached house from a project developer. 5.50 meters wide and 9.5 meters deep. 2 stores and a roof, small garden, 2 cars to commute to work each day. Everybody happy. This standard house is extremely efficient to build and gives a profit of 10 till 12% to the developer. That's 25,000, 30,000 euros profit per house sold. When you should want to understand the reasons of the worldwide housing crisis and the rising real estate prices, most people and politicians would give the most simple answer. It is because we do not build enough homes. The problem, in their opinion, is the insufficient supply of houses. The building and financial sector is quite happy, of course, with this explanation. A lobby was successful. But the right answer comes from Josh Ryan Collins, head of research of the London University College, in his book, Why Can't You Afford a Home? It is published in London last year. Housing prices are rising worldwide because there is a huge demand for houses as a financial asset. You have only to look to the rise of the profits of real estate investors. On average, a return of 16%, 4% on rents, and 12% on value growth. International investment funds are very eager on Dutch real estate. More than 4 billion euros is invested by foreign investors in Amsterdam. They are building up portfolios of 1,000 rental apartments and homes in the Netherlands. And many other medium and small-sized developers and investors follow. Money is not only earned with rents and selling after 15 to 20 years, but also with the selling of mortgages, securities, collateralized debt obligations, and other financial products invented by the whiz kids of Wall Street's banks. This process is called the financiation of housing. This is what really causes the present housing crisis. Will the market solve the problems of the housing market? Forget it. Better quality for lower prices and better services. It was a promise in 1990 that did not come true and will never work. Also in the Netherlands, rental apartment from investment and pension funds do not offer affordable housing for the middle class on the long run. At the start of the rental period, the rent per square meter per month is so high that a middle-class household can only afford a very small apartment, as I showed you earlier in this presentation. The yearly increase of the rents of these private investors is above the yearly rise of incomes and inflation. This means that an average household will become every year a little poorer. And after 15 to 20 years, rent regulation agreements with municipalities will end. Households are confronted with free market rents, and in general, investors will sell the apartment and cash the value growth. We have to understand that there will be always a large number of households in our cities that will need state aid to afford a decent home. Not only low-income groups, but also households, and especially households with children, with incomes still 80,000 euros a year per household. Large number of middle-class households need some form of preference and assistance to help them stay in the city, especially if they have one or more kids to raise and need, let's say, at least 70 till 90 square meter space, adequate facilities, and a good and sunny balcony to relax, play, and eat outside. Cities should be much more critical on the long-term impact of profit-driven housing investments and look for housing schemes based on non-profit exploitation, based on a fair cost price principle and democratic control of the residents over the housing situation. Cities for Adequate Housing calls in their declaration for cities that are inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable by 2030, and ask for more powers to better regulate the real estate markets and more funds to improve the public housing stock. The 40 endorsing cities also embrace the cooperative model that has proved all over the world to be a model that guarantees permanent good quality and affordable housing for low and middle income households with a minimum of support of the public authorities and a maximum of self-management and democratic control. Amsterdam is one of the members of the coalition. Rotterdam not, unfortunately. Amsterdam has taken the declaration seriously, as I will explain. The cities of Zurich and Munich did not sign the declaration, but their housing policy are really doing what is necessary. In Munich, since 2015, 13 new housing cooperatives were founded with the help of the city and a special institute, the Mietbouwcentrale. Munich takes care in all big housing schemes the need of differentiation in the procurement for all income groups, and that is facilitated by the allocation of land, reduced land prices, and agreements on rent development. It's really a marvel to see the creativity and community building in these projects. It really adds to a better place to live for everybody in Munich. Zurich is another example and offers a number of iconic housing projects for low and middle income households. Meer als wonen. Next sheet, please. This is a Genossenschaft Kogro. This is Kalkbreite, one of the iconic projects in Zurich. Kalkbreite, Meer als wonen, Grünnat, you will see the sheets, and many others. Zurich has a strong tradition in Genossenschaften, housing cooperatives, since the beginning of the 20th century. The big boom of the past 10 years is caused by the outcome of a referendum in 2011. The vast majority of the population of Zurich voted for a rise of the non-profit and cooperative housing stock. By 2050, 1/3 of all houses in Zurich must be owned by housing cooperative and other non-profit institutions. At this moment, it's 20%. It really means that every square meter of land has only to be issued to housing cooperatives at the moment. And that explains this extremely housing boom of so many splendid projects. This has a huge impact. Nearly all land has to be issued to the housing corporations, but also there are agreements made with strict rent regulations and reduced land leases. The city organizes competitions to select these new housing cooperatives and also helps them to select the best architects for the projects. It made Zurich a mecca for everybody interested in the empowerment of residents, housing policy, sustainability, and high quality at affordable rents. It is really impressive to see all the benefits of self-help and shared responsibility, the enormous variety of housing layouts. It is a non-profit housing model for housing quality and affordability that is delivered over several generations, what it has promised. And I have to say also, this is not experimental. This model is a proven model and a very solid business model for more than 100 years in many European countries. For example, in Germany, 2 million people live in Genossenschaften, housing corporations. Sheet 20. Even kijken hoor. No, you are too fast, Mike, with the sheets. Yeah, okay. We stay a little at sheet 20, Mike. We are not yet at Mark Twain. Yeah, all right. Which progress is made in the Netherlands with the necessary reset of our housing policy? If I should look at the situation in Rotterdam, I would say not so far, and still a long way to go. The city of Rotterdam still believes that the market will solve the housing problems, still managing mainly on high communal profits on ever-growing land prices, and not using the possibilities of more creative tender procedures within EU regulations, and not taking care really of the large population with low incomes and lower middle incomes that cannot rent or buy a proper house in the city. The board and members of the first new housing corporations at Rotterdam's Woongenootschap is struggling now 4 years, and although we had some ambassadors within the bureaucracy all that years, at the decisive moments we lacked the necessary support and understanding of important principles of cooperative housing compared with free market investment in rental apartments. What is needed in Rotterdam and all Dutch large and middle-sized cities is a real vision on housing and the role of the local authorities to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable by 2030. The thing the Declaration of Cities ask. What is really needed is that politicians see the urgency of the introduction of new cooperative housing models in the Dutch housing market. After 4 years of so-called false cooperative experiments, it is important to stress the Dutch instinct to see a house as an object of trade and profit, and therefore allow the residents a say in the daily management, but keep the ownership of the real estate in own hands. In a real cooperative, the real estate is collectively owned by the cooperative and never sold. The goal is decent housing, not speculation and trade. The only way to regulate rents is not selling public-owned land, but work with land lease constructions with agreements that excludes speculation with all regulated rent housing and guarantees a regulated rent development. Now we can have, yes, now we are just in sheet 21. Have to reconsider the role of the woningcorporaties. They should be able, within a widened framework of the housing law, to invest in inclusive and sustainable neighborhoods for low and middle income households, as they have done before 2015. Volkshuisvesting, housing for the folk, not only low income, but also the low middle income households. Skip the restrictions in investments in facilities that foster the health, emancipation and education of the residents, the neighborhoods they work. Accept also that nowadays woningcorporaties are big and professional institutions that have no real connection with their renters. Growing numbers of them should want to have a say in the management of the housing estates. And it is a real shame, in my opinion, that the visionary amendment in the housing law of 2015 from Adrie Duivenstein, one of the members of our Senate, and the right of renters to take over their housing for reduced prices in a democratic controlled housing cooperative is in the last 5 years implemented only 2 times. And I really think that more pressure is needed when especially the 20 largest housing corporations, woningcorporaties, to support and finance this kind of initiatives. But even if we should allow woningcorporaties to build for middle-class households, we will see that many of them won't have the funds needed to do so. Even if we would skip the special woningcorporatie tax, the verhuurdersheffing. Their housing stock needs huge investments to make it sustainable. And many of them are not very rich either, and have to take care to fulfill the financial ratios of the financial institutions are asking for. And therefore, the Netherlands will need, like Zurich, like Munich, Berlin, Wien and other European cities, a third housing sector between woningcorporaties and the market. We also are in urgent need for housing cooperatives, according to the international accepted definitions of the ICA. Affordable housing for low and lower middle class households is at the present building costs only possible with reduced land prices. This is no problem within European rules of state aid if the agreements retain restrictions on the selling of property, the allocation of housing to certain income groups, and the yearly rent increases that are allowed. A lot of bureaucracy would be avoided if new housing cooperatives would have fixed land prices, compared with the present regulations for woningcorporaties. A land lease with yearly payments would even much better. then the housing cooperative would not have to finance this part of the overall total cost of a housing complex. The city should, and now we see Emil Kleuty, the city should, as Zurich did in 1924, under the rule of the Wieboud of Zurich, Emil Kleuty, reduce the capital contribution of the members of a housing cooperative to 6%. Work with land leases to make the financing more easy, and assist the housing cooperative with 15-year loans with moderate rent conditions in the planning phase before the actual building starts and the building site is available as a security for the bank with a 70 or 80% bank loan. I'm very happy that this is exactly what the City of Amsterdam is proposing in the policy document Financiering Amsterdamse woningcorporaties of the 12th of May 2020. In addition, much more attention is needed for initiatives that want to realize combined complex of private-owned housing. The bouwgroepenmodel of Berlin, CPO, collectief particulier opdrachtgeverschap in Dutch, and this is the kind of complex I'm living in myself, as Michelle explained at the start, shows that for households that earn more than 2 times the average income, this is also a viable model for housing in the cities and fostering also stable communities. In the Netherlands, most politicians tend to make a housing program based only on 2 things, rents and the division owner-occupied rent, combined with rent levels and prices. A city that, as we have seen in Munich and Zurich, does not have a policy that makes a division in the housing program in commissioning parties, who is the agent, and only looks to rent and price levels, will miss, in my opinion, the essential long-term control of an inclusive city and resilient communities that will foster the city. The big question is, who runs the business and why this party is in the housing market? To provide a proper housing or seeing housing as a commodity or investment opportunity, looking for a financial asset, as Josh Collins explained. I'm very lucky that Amsterdam did understand this message. And also very happy that in Delft, Eindhoven and Zwolle, municipalities and woningcorporaties are supporting new housing cooperatives. We will do our utmost to realize the first Rotterdam cooperative rental apartments in the Odeon location. And if we get the right support of woningcorporatie Woonstad Rotterdam in the city of Rotterdam, I really hope others will follow fast. More or less it will mean, as Amsterdam shows, that with the right conditions and support, new initiatives will flourish and will deliver a variety of housing complex the market would never deliver. And even more important, will stimulate community building and more resilient and inclusive cities. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for this painting this very neat image, I must say, of the housing market. As you say, the market will not solve the housing crisis, and I think this is not particularly for Rotterdam, Amsterdam, or the Netherlands, but it resonates with most cities, I would say, in Western Europe, and that is. That's why I appreciate your explanation such a lot, because we have a lot of international listeners in the audience and also a lot of discussion on these topics.
The same is true in Vancouver, Los Angeles, Moscow. You know, this is a worldwide problem. We thought that the market would solve the problem, and we didn't see the financiation of all the let's say the processes behind. And I think that the big contribution of Josh Collins is that he really explained to all of us in a very easy way. You can read his book in 2 hours. What is behind all this? And it's a big frustration for me that in politics and in the public discussions, and also not in much papers, we are really, that we really understand what is going on at this moment. And at first we should start to understand the process. If we don't really understand what is going on, we can't change it. And we don't make the good policy programs either for our next elections. So I really hope this...
Housing markets, that is what we need to understand, the financialization.
The financialization of the housing market and all the capital, which is the Flits capital, is going around in the world looking for a good investment, and obligations and shares are not, are not any longer safe and not always giving a good return. And the best return you can find is real estate. And the best return you can find is real estate in markets that are stable, like the Dutch market. And therefore, this process is so very dangerous for our cities. And it starts in Rotterdam and Amsterdam. But in the meantime, also Zwolle, Utrecht, Eindhoven, Nijmegen, Arnhem, Groningen, it will come everywhere. And all the other investors will follow. For they have all the care for pensions and for their, for their income and for their return. So really quite severe, interventions are needed in the housing market. And you really have to look for the agent and the reason why the agent is in the housing business. And this is the next kind of message I want to give, that this should be in the policy documents, and this should also be in our bestemmingsplannen. In Roombeek, we did it. We made charts in which we designed areas to which commissioner it should be issued. And I think this is needed. I would be very glad if in our bestemmingsplannen there was said this is for the housing corporaties, the voting corporaties. This is for housing associations, CPO engines, and these are the projects for the market.
Yeah. Luckily, we don't have to start from zero in coming up with concepts for housing cooperations, because like you said, Amsterdam is actually in the Netherlands the most far developed with this policies. And in order to better understand what actually is going on there, I would love to involve Maarten van Poelgeest in this discussion to share his experiences with the Housing Cooperatives Action Plan that he developed in Amsterdam.
Maarten van Poelgeest, he has been appointed by the municipality of Amsterdam to explore and to boost the municipal housing cooperative action plan to stimulate the growth of housing cooperatives in Amsterdam. Previously, Maarten van Poelgeest, who is of the Green Party, was an alderman in the municipality of Amsterdam, and he was responsible for spatial planning, area development, climate, and energy. Welcome, Maarten. Who is
So, can you take us along with your story on the housing corporations and why is it necessary to have this revival, but also how is Amsterdam shaping this action plan?
Well, when it comes to the plans of Amsterdam itself, I think Marije Raap this afternoon will tell more in detail exactly what the ambitions are of the city of Amsterdam. So I understood I should tell something more in general, and well, the biggest part of the story, well, maybe the biggest part of the story is more or less the same as what Peter told. So I would be very brief, so then people can ask questions. Well, to introduce myself, Michelle already did, so I think we can skip this one and go to the next one. I hope so. Yeah, what I think that a major paradigm shift is needed, and already mentioned also by Michelle and Peter, that the housing market has become a major driver, I think, of inequality in the Netherlands. Like also in other places, the housing prices really exploded over the past 10 years, was also the period just before. And the equality increases every year, not only within cities, but also between different regions. To stop this, I think in three ways there is a paradigm shift needed. The first one is about the land, already discussed. The second one is what is the value of the property, and the third one is that housing markets are more and more regional markets. I will go into the first two ones, but to say something about the third one, in Holland, still a lot of policy, housing policy, is national policies. And therefore, it's very difficult from cities to have your own policy. So in that sense, I think that should be changed. Then about the lands. The land, of course, is part of the common. It's a public. It's from the public. And well, as we know since Ricardo, the price of grain is not high because the price of the land is high. It's the other way around. The price of the land is high because of the price of the grain is high. So with all those housing prices exploding, the prices of land go up every year, and you don't have to do anything of it. So location is the main driver when it comes to the value of property and land. If you have a system of land lease, then it creates opportunities to keep the prices affordable or retain the surplus for in public hands. And of course, that's fair, especially when, because of public investments, the place got more attractive. Then of course the public should also have their share. Then we go to the next one. Well, what is the property of the value? And I think that the paradigm shift should be that it depends on what people can afford. So in the current system, the investors are the haves, and the people who rent are the haves not. And the biggest driver is, of course, that the highest bidder that makes the price of the property. The shift is needed that we go the other way around. So the first question, of course, is what is a reasonable share of your income to pay for housing? And of course, there are costs connected to housing. If you withdraw these costs from what you can afford, then the net rent, which is then, that should depend the value. That's what the property really is worth, and not the highest bidder. Well, that makes that you look upon all the housing policy from a different angle, and well, what people can miss is then should be the driving force. So then we go to the last one. And then the question is, how can cooperatives help if you introduce this system in which what people can afford depends the value of the properties? Well, what is possible if you own the land? In the case of Amsterdam, the city has about 80% of the land, and you can lease it under the so-called market price and make in that way affordable housing possible. The other way is for the housing companies, also mentioned by Peter. They can sell also their houses to cooperatives under the so-called market price. The problem, of course, is that then individual people can sell the house again and cash. And therefore, I think, or what we did in Amsterdam, is to introduce 3 rules that ensures that the social capital which is being invested in the houses, that the social capital won't up and in the pockets of the lucky ones, and also in future that the affordable housing being made possible will be still there for low and middle income people. And those three rules are very simple, and the first one, also mentioned by Peter already, is that housing cooperatives cannot sell, and of course they don't want to sell. So people are collectively owner, but individually they rent. The second one is that when people move out, only people with low and middle income can enter. We don't keep the rent low for high income families. And the third one is that democratic value, that people living in the cooperative, that they decide. So those three rules should be really hard, and then it is possible for the city to give the land for a lower price to the housing cooperative, or to sell the houses for a lower price to the housing cooperative. So the final remark of me would be, and that's when you go ahead. So yeah, by Victor Hugo, nothing is stronger than the idea whose time has come. And I think that could be true for the housing cooperative for so far.
Thanks, Maarten, for this, also especially for ending on this positive note. Before I go to the others in this room who might have questions, because we do have a small audience, which consists solely of some of the speakers who live in Rotterdam and who didn't have to travel. So they're completely corona safe, their presence here. And also we have questions on the chat maybe, but I would first like to ask you some small questions. Amsterdam does have 80% of the land in lease, erfpacht, but it is an exception to the rule, right? Especially in Rotterdam, the city has been trying hard to get rid of all this land ownership. So how about these kind of cities that don't own the land for as large a number as Amsterdam?
Well, I think it would be very unwise to sell the land, because it gives you the opportunity to influence the whole housing market. The housing cooperative is one of the models, but also when it comes to the housing associations, which still have in Amsterdam about 45% of all the houses. And I think the percentage also in Rotterdam is about 40%. Of course, you want those housing associations also to ensure affordable housing. It's not only the cooperative who has to do that, but also the classical housing associations. Mm-hmm. Well, for the city government, it's very nice to own the land, because that gives them an opportunity to influence the situation and make affordable housing possible in their own city. So I don't understand why all those cities want to sell their land. It's one of their major assets, and I strongly would advise them just to keep it and not selling it.
Good, that's one very clear advice. Another question I had was, the measure to make these housing corporations only available to people with lower income. How do you avoid, just like happened with social housing, that people tend to start earning more and becoming actually part of a different category of renters, and then you get this phenomenon of scheefwonen, which means that people who actually should not be living there still live there over time. So what do you make them move out?
Well, first of all, there is something about blaming the victim when you see the discussions of scheefwonen, because then you get the feeling that the one who is a scheefwoner, that it's not good. But I always say to people, imagine a city in which nobody lives scheef. There are no scheefwoners. Well, probably that's not the city you want to live in, because scheefwonen is being caused by people getting better. That's why they got scheefwoners. They said if they don't get better, they are not getting scheefwoners. Dus first of all, it's because of social mobility that there are scheefwoners. So within every city, there is always a certain percentage of scheefwoners. And what is important is that this group all the time are different individuals. So people get better and maybe at a certain point get out of the social housing and gets on another part in the housing market. So this flexible streaming kind of thing is what a city always needs. As soon as that not is happening, that people are not moving, then something is really wrong with the housing market. And that's what's happening now. If you have at least a social house, nobody leaves. They can't make the step to a other part of the housing market. And if you are living somewhere in which you buy the house, you're also not moving, because every year by doing nothing, the prices are going up. So everybody stays where he is. And that's not good in a housing market. So what I should do is that maybe there should be a rent which is depending on income. I think that's really fair. So if your income go up, you pay a bit more, and then of course you yourself can decide if you move on or not. But then one way or another way, the subsidy being given maybe 10 years ago is being paid back to the public as well.
I'd like to go to maybe questions from the audience, or Wouter maybe.
Yes, I had one. Can you hear me, Maarten?
Very difficult, but let me see if I can put it a bit louder.
Why don't you take my chair?
Oh, okay. We'll just swap. Hi.
Yeah, that's better.
That's better? Okay.
I have a question. Well, I suppose this is a question maybe as a reaction to both your and to Peter's story. Both of you agree that a third paradigm is needed, that apart from, we have the market, and then we have the housing corporations, and we need a third system, which is the housing cooperatives. Now, the picture that Peter painted of the state of our social housing in the Netherlands is so bleak that I was thinking, instead of a third part, don't we need to restore the second part? Because isn't there a kind of a tension between, on the one hand, the self-determination, etc., story of the housing cooperatives, and this enormous, massive problem that we have in the affordable housing market? So, does the housing cooperative really attack the problems of affordable housing that we have in the Netherlands, or is it something that is much more fulfilling the needs of middle and higher income people who want to self-determine the way that they live?
When it comes to the main issue about affordable housing, more is needed than only housing cooperatives. So I agree on that. But it could be part of the solution. And the other part is, of course, that when it comes to the central regulations, for instance, we have this system with the liberalization, how you call it, grens. This what is the regulated area? That's now until €650 a month. That's for cities of like Rotterdam or Amsterdam, it's too low. The part of the market you should regulate should be bigger. So maybe until 1,000 or €1,100. So that's another policy measure, which I'm in favor of. And is also helping to make, in this case, the housing for middle incomes more affordable. I think what Peter says, that also the housing associations, that they should be allowed for a lower or middle income. They can't do that right now, the middle income, but that the regulation should be make it possible to do that again. So there are different things you should do to tackle the real huge problem which our cities confronted with.
Okay, thank you. Maybe somebody else can take the chair if there are other
Other
questions. Yeah, okay, you can.
No other questions? Maybe a last remark.
I'm sure that Peter has some reactions on the story of Maarten.
Yeah, now I fully agree with what Maarten said, and I will also underline the importance of the land issue. My sleet of Mark Twain was buy land, they don't make it any longer. It's so important that the cities keep their land and keep their land in land lease constructions, and the land lease construction will also help to regulate all the things that are necessary for affordability. You can, with the land lease, you can easily guarantee that the rent development is, as you wish. So this is very important, and this is also a paradigm shift for the city of Rotterdam. Has changed its policy, had land lease, and is now buying all this land. That's pretty
clear advice.
Yeah, and on what Wouter said, I stressed in my lecture the importance of strengthening the woningcorporatie sector again. But we should also recognize that the woningcorporatie sector has become a very big institutional kind of organization, with in some parts also kind of monopoly, supplier in the housing market. I know it very well from inside. I've been director of two quite large woningcorporaties. So I wish them all the best for the future, and also should wish that they could build again for middle income people, and that they could also invest in good facilities in the neighborhoods, which are very important for good living conditions there. But what housing cooperatives offer is, in the first place, a very strong and stable community. You see that everywhere in Europe. People go and live in a housing cooperative and stay living there for 30, 20, maybe even lifetime long, and arrange with one another in a democratic way how this community functions. And they have also, so it's in our neighborhoods very important to have this kind of stable communities, and also kind of differentiation between different kind of housing suppliers. This is the first thing. The woningcorporaties can never offer democratic control of the housing situations. I was director of a big housing association with 6,000 rent members. It doesn't exist any longer. We made foundations of them all. There is no democratic control any longer there. And the third thing is, and that is very interesting, that also the housing associations, they have lots of rules also in their rent increase, their yearly rent increase. So the rents in the housing association go up with, let's say, inflation. But one of my sheets was of Kogo in Munich, and you see the kind of flat development of the rent. And this is possible because of the non-profit and cost price principle, but also because the members bring in capital themselves. And this means that in a housing cooperative, an increase in, let's say, income will mean that you have a little more to spend for other things as only housing, on your children, on better food, maybe other important things. And this is a big difference with the housing associations. And I think in the afternoon or later on, I will explain that even further.
Yeah.
And this,
I will have to stop you right here.
Yeah. Okay.
The first session, and even now,
I'm a very bad moderator. We're running out of time, so.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It is just a sign of this topic being so interesting and giving a lot of food for thought. I'm sure that many of the issues and the solutions that the two of you mentioned, like don't sell the land to municipalities, or the value of property is what people can afford, they may sound very radical, but that's why I'm happy that we actually have this proof of concept later on in the day with projects who are already doing this. So it is very possible. And for this moment, I would like to thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to the viewers at home for being with us, of course. This is the symposium Taking Back Housing, aka the International Newtown Day 2020, and we will be back in a few minutes, I guess, for the second part of this conversation, in which 3 practitioners of alternative forms of housing will share their insights and experiences. See you then. Thank you again. See you later.
Moeten we nou klappen?
Welcome back to the online symposium of the International Newtown Day 2020, Taking Back Housing. We're exploring the ways towards more democratic and alternative ways of housing. This initiative was taken by the International Newtown Institute and the Independent School for the City. My name is Provoost, and I am excited to guide you through the next hour, in which 3 inspirational speakers will share how they organize alternative housing in their cities, which challenges they face throughout the process, and what they need to further develop and expand these initiatives. But first, I would like to introduce you to one of my colleagues, Simone Rots, who is sitting next to me. And who is in charge of the connections with you, the audience, and who will tell us something about the audience and the chats and the discussions that are going on right there.
Yes, it's very lively discussion, very lively debate, very nice. And it was already about affordable land before anyone could talk about it. And there are some specific questions. I just wanted to say that we are going to answer them either through the symposium or later on. And I want to address that there are people from many cities: Limerick, Stevenage, Rotterdam, Arnhem, Milton Keynes, Berlin, Hanover, Oxford. So we are very pleased with that. And I will try to do as much as possible to make those accessible for you. And I'll see you later.
Great, thanks. And now we go to Amsterdam. Our first speaker is on Zoom, Gerard Roemers. He is the co-founder and board member of the Warren, the first independent housing corporation of Amsterdam. Gerard also works as a sustainability consultant. He's been educated in spatial planning as well as environmental sciences and industrial ecology. And within the Warren, Gerard's main focus is on realizing a sustainable building design, providing a place to live for urban flora and fauna, as well as the human inhabitants of the Warren. I hope I'm summarizing it well, like this. So, Gerard, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll share my screen. Thanks for a really great introduction and actually also a very good summary of the project. let's see if it all works accordingly as it should with the technology. Can you see my screen at the moment? Just as a test. Is my screen visible? Can somebody confirm that?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
You can do full screen.
Yeah, I'll put it on just a second. Slideshow. Yes. Great. Yeah, so today I'm going to try and tell you about the initiative of the Warren to realize cooperative housing in Amsterdam. I'll try and do this in 15 minutes, which should be okay. Yeah, because it's a relatively short presentation, I'll give a bird's eye view of the project, but I'm really eager to also get into a conversation and answer some questions after the presentation is done. Maybe that will give us a chance to go deeper into certain aspects that you find especially interesting. So first I want to tell you a little bit about the project itself, what the Warren is, the cooperative behind it, the community behind it, and ultimately the building that we are trying to realize. I want to explain about our organization and process, and finally I want to look ahead, tell you where we stand in the process at the moment, what our next steps are, and also share with you a few lessons learned.
Yeah, it's not full screen yet. We see
It
the
is not?
view.
Oh, that's strange. Let me see if I can correct that for you. Maybe if I just go like this. Still slideshow, I think.
Yeah.
Let me see. I think I've got it covered. How about now?
Yes, good.
Yeah, right. Let me see then if this is the correct presentation. Yeah. Perfect. So as I said, I want to first discuss what the Warren is, and I will start with the cooperative itself. The Warren is a cooperative. Now, what does that mean? There's different flavors of cooperative housing, and I think it's good to place the Warren within that continuum. So cooperative development in the Netherlands is quite rare. It doesn't happen so much. In Germany, in Switzerland, there's a lot more, of course. You have different types of cooperative development, and I think that the variety can be explained through two different axes, basically, whether you manage or actually own a building, and whether you cooperatively manage or own an existing building, or whether you're really designing and building something new. There are a few examples of cooperatives managing existing buildings, or even buildings that have been built anew by either the government or commercial developers in the Netherlands. But there are not really examples like the Warren, where the cooperative also acts as a real estate developer. And I think that's the unique thing about this project, and also some of the other projects you'll hear about today, is the aspiration to actually do the development and construction phase in a cooperative model as well. Legally speaking, our cooperative is an association which gets membership through rental contract. So as soon as you start renting with the Warren, you are a member, and vice versa. And that's how the cooperative will function also once the building has been established and once the project is there. For the moment, the board members of the Warren are its members in the development phase. You can think about it a little bit like the canteen in your local football club, so to speak. That football club owns, it's an association, and that owns the canteen and the locker rooms and maybe the stadium. And through the association, in principle, you have a say and a bit of ownership in all of that real estate, but you do not buy or sell pieces of that real estate. It's not your something that you own. And with the Warren, it's the same construct, where you rent from the association. You also decide in this phase that we're in now about the design and the development and what type of building is being made. And once you live there, you decide together as an association how you live there, how you maintain the building, what you do with cleaning, all these types of things. But none of the future inhabitants will actually own the real estate for the Warren. They will only rent from the from the association, and they will do that for as long as they rent. They are a member, and after they stop renting and living at the building, they also stop being a member for the association. That's quite important for us because one of the goals for the project, and I'll get to that in a minute, is also to create less speculation on real estate, which happens a lot, especially in Amsterdam, where our project is situated as well. And it also creates a model where people with a lower income that normally cannot buy do get more vote and more of a say in how they live. Normally, when you rent a building, you can choose something sometimes about where you live, but you can't really design the building that you're going to live in. And this cooperative development form actually democratizes that piece of the process. There's a few pictures. I've translated most, but some are in Dutch still, so apologies for that. For us, this cooperative development model is important because it allows us to steer much more clearly the dimensions of the building and the program of the building that we find important. So the Warren is realizing 36 apartments for social and middle income rents, so it's affordable. That's betaalbaar on the lower right corner. We realize a building, and I'll show that in a moment, with a lot of collective provisions and a lot of collective spaces. And we're trying to do it sustainably, which is one of my core focus areas. And through a cooperative development model, we can apply these things, even though it's a rental apartment block. So the Warren is a cooperative, but it's also a community. I just want to briefly show that because I think it's one of the reasons for our success. These are some of the people in the community back in, I think, 2015 already, where they are building a permaculture farm. This is all the people in front of the farmhouse. This is that same group of people plus some others doing a big festival and a wedding actually also combined with that in France. And this is, again, that group of people at the start of the Warren. I think what I want to show here, first and foremost, is that because we already had a really big community, not just a group of friends, but also a community that is used to organizing things collectively and quite complex things, from festivals and cultural events to setting up a farm in the south of Portugal or doing a really big wedding. We have this organizational power, and I think that's been really important in a trajectory like this. As you'll see in a couple of slides, it's something that takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort and drive, and we had a really great group of people supporting the project from the start that we could draw from. So the Warren, and then I'll get to the final aspect of what the project is basically creating a lair, if you will, for all of these people. The collective that I just told you about is called konijn, or rabbit in Dutch. There's a story behind that, but I think for time's sake, I'm gonna leave that. But with the Warren, we're creating a building where all of these rabbits, all of the people from the community, from the collective, can actually live. So that's the final aspect of what the Warren is. It's a building, concretely. And I want to show a few aspects of the building that I think are unique and interesting to share and important to us as a community and as a cooperative developer. The main structure of the building is set up in such a way that, and that you can see visualized here, the lower layer of the building, so the floor ground, is largely dedicated to collective functions, a theater hall, a really big kitchen and living space, lots of different things. And there's one really big flight of stairs cutting through all 5 floors of the building to the very top from that collective space. And everybody will enter and reside at first in the collective spaces at the bottom before kind of going up these flights of stairs to their respective partial communities, let's say. Every floor is a community of its own as well later on. I'll show a few pictures of it later. Along this big flight of stairs, there's different communal functions located as well. So it's kind of the main street, let's say, of the building almost, where there's office spaces, there's meditations rooms, there's a big greenhouse on the top floor, which is the block on the top left. So there's a lot of communal functions for the whole building realized around the first floor and the stairs. And then there's semi-public or semi-communal spaces as well, which is the shared kitchens and living spaces for each of the 4 floors. Here you see a visualization of what that looks like. So the whole building is designed in such a way that you get social interaction upon entering and upon visiting different functions of the complex and different floors, so that you run into each other, so that you get a lot of interaction, and you can get kind of this type of interaction that you also have in a small town. You meet each other, you see each other, you run into each other, and that's kind of what we're trying to create through the spatial design as well. Next to this collective function, sustainability is really important. One major aspect is that we're creating for humans, but we're also designing habitat for other animals and other plants. So the whole facade of the building is engineered around that, where we host a lot of trees, a lot of plants, and a lot of green space, and also a greenhouse on the top floor of the building. I'll show that in a bit more detail in a moment. Next to this nature inclusive aspect of the design, of course, more traditional sustainability themes like the energy provision for the building, the type of material that we're building with, climate resilience, and being able to deal with extreme weather and rainfall are also really important aspects. So ultimately, the building will actually generate slightly more energy than it needs. We're building in wood, which saves a lot of carbon versus concrete and steel. We're trying to also recycle and reuse materials. So on the left, you can see all of the wooden poles that we want to use for the facade, which we actually bought from a demolishing company, which was going to incinerate them. So we're trying to incorporate sustainability in a lot of different aspects of the building. Here you can see a brief example of what the facade will look like. And all of these, this framework is in principle recycled hardwood then. And here's another render of what we envision the building to look like once it's there. So now that you have an idea of what the project is, it's these 36 apartments, it's social and middle income rent, it's a new way of building with wood, which is uncommon in the Netherlands. It has a big focus on sustainability, collectivity. I want to share a little bit about the process and organization of the project. First of all, here's our process kind of in an overarching timeline. And you can see that we've already been at it for quite a while, starting in 2016 when we started to do research and ideation around this community and about the building, to 2017 when a tender was coming online from the municipality, also enabling us to get land as a cooperative. And I think that's really important to mention. We don't have time to go into it in detail now, but the municipality of Amsterdam actually made land available on the premises that you would develop it as a cooperative. So they've really stimulated this new pillar in the housing market in Amsterdam, and we are incredibly grateful for that. It's really been a unique opportunity that we've been able to jump on, but without the city and without the vision behind it, we couldn't have done that. So ultimately, we won the tender out of 3 submissions and have been starting the design in 2018. Going up till now, we've been detailing the design, going into the technical details, and at this point we're doing that with a larger team of designers, installation advisors, construction advisors, etc. And we're almost there. We're planning to start building in the first quarter of next year. So it's quite exciting. And at the moment, we're finishing the final details in terms of technical installations, building engineering, and budgets as well, in line with those. There's a few things I want to briefly kind of highlight out of this process. One is building with the community. It was really interesting to do, also quite a challenge. So just to give you an idea how you design a house with 50 people, that was the stage of the project where most of the whole community has been involved, really shaping the program and the design of the building. We did a lot of surveys to get everybody's ideas, desires, the functionalities, kind of the demands for the building in line. We did a lot of workshops to actually show people also what their ideas translated to spatially, and to also help people with trade-offs between, for example, sustainability and budget. So that's quite an involved process. And we set up separate working groups, again, to detail the collective spaces, because these are, of course, very important for everyone. In total, this took us almost half a year. which sounds like a lot of time, but it's actually been quite a sprint to get that going. But it's been a really big factor of success. And the interesting thing is that not even all the people that designed with us, they weren't even sure if they would actually get a place in the house. They just wanted to make it really amazing and according to their ideals. And we knew from the start that we had more people than we actually had space for in terms of providing them with an apartment. And despite that, everyone just went full force. So it's really interesting. Finally, I'm also seeing that I'm almost out of time, so I'll make it relatively quick. But finance, I think, is key. So I do want to talk you through it briefly. How do we pay for the projects? That's ultimately really important. Well, first, the costs. Most of those go into the building cost, which is the blue part of the pie chart that you see. A lot of it is also taxes, which is the red part. And then the light blue part is also taxes. Then there's still permit payments also below that. And then in the green part, there's advisory costs, designers, architects, all of that. And the little yellow sliver and the red sliver are the inventory, so just furniture, things like that, once the building is there, and the facade that I spoke about before. So then you have an idea of the buildup of the cost, and this translates to roughly 2,200 euros per square meter gross floor service. How do we finance that? We've got a big loan from a German bank, a mortgage. That's the red square that you see. Did somebody want to say something? No?
Not yet.
And then the blue part is an investment fund of the province of North Holland, which is the province where Amsterdam is situated. And there's a bit of other finance sources, which I'll get to in a minute. Of course, these have different interest rates tied to them as well. The bank has a lot less risk than an investment fund, so that also translates into the business model. And the other part consists of subsidies and loans, which is the orange and the green part, and a crowd lending. So we actually handed out bonds for different types of interest for 7, 15, and 20 years that allowed people to buy into the project for a nice interest and also invest in something sustainably. So that's really great. After we would have realized the project, then most of the money will go back to the bank. So that's the big yellow part, and to the investment fund. We have to pay land lease to the city, which is the blue part, and there's reservations for maintenance and upkeep for the building. So then final slide, looking ahead and also looking back. We are almost there. As I said, tweaking the final bits of the budget and the design. We have a really great building team around us with that. So we're really eager to keep going with it. And we're in the final stretches. It is a balancing act between the design, the sustainability aspirations, and the budget, but we're close. And we have a few challenges that we ran into, finances. I think also looking ahead in the trade-offs between finances and sustainability has been really important. We had the aspiration to build the whole building out of wood, but that was too expensive for a project like this, which is not in the upper segment of the market. So we've also had to make some compromises, and it's now a hybrid between concrete and wood, and a smart solution between that. There's also a lot more let's say, legal issues that you run into than you might think before if you're not used to this type of process. So I think those are things that we would really look out to next time that we do something like this. We've been really lucky in terms of tips. I think that's important to mention, in getting a location really quickly. I know that some other cooperatives have been struggling with it. We also got our finances in order from the start. So in that sense, we knew the parameters that we were working with, and we knew that we'd be able to get a project off the ground quite early. So I think that's a big factor of success. And if you want to dive into something like this, I've listed my dream team below. We have a lot of people that are very driven and that put a lot of time and effort in this, but sometimes you also miss some expertise. We have a lot of good project managers, negotiators. We have an economist in our team, so that's really nice. We do not have a lawyer or someone with legal expertise, and that's been something that we've been running into quite a bit, but thankfully we have support also on that front now. but that's something that I'd definitely look out to if you're having aspirations in this direction. Thank you. That's it. I'm sorry for running a bit out of time. I hope that's not too big of a problem. And I'm very curious to see if there's any questions or any subjects that you'd like to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Gerard. Well, the first question would be, and Simona just handed me this question from the chat in YouTube. You apparently from the pictures, you have a really close community at hand who is behind this project.
Yeah.
Which is of course necessary and really positive, but how does that relate to people who are as yet outside of this community? How would, for example, newcomers in the Netherlands integrate into such collectives?
The way we've set it up is that we've been open to other people applying for an apartment from the start. We've also pulled in, especially before the design process started, some people that we didn't know so well directly. As long as you really then, as an outsider, so to say, also participate and put effort into this whole process, actually integration, in my experience, goes really fast. There have been a few people that were kind of coming from the outside in, but that went full on into the design workshops that contribute to lots and lots of aspects of the project. And there's also other people that were really at the core of the group from the start, but didn't have the time and energy to really invest into the project. And in my experience, that's been a bigger determinant of whether people can actually integrate and stick with it than their initial position, let's say, in a community like this.
And do you think that also this concept would work for other groups of people, like, for instance, senior citizens, older people, or people with disabilities? Also,
yeah, definitely. I think, for example, we've designed also for actually disability, so the whole building is accessible by with a wheelchair. Our expectance is also not that this specific group of people will always stay in this building. So it's really set up as something that we think is an addition to the city, to Amsterdam in this case, and not a specific building with a specific apartment for a specific group of people, because it's not something that you buy, it's something that you rent. So we've designed for the city rather than for our specific group alone. We've tried to keep that bigger picture in mind. And with seniors, I mean, we've actually had a lot of questions already for support and for older people that would like to live together in a way like this. They've been asking us for the design, but also the business case, the financial model, stuff like that. And we're really eager to help them out wherever we can, especially once our construction process starts. We'll have a lot more brain space available to actively help other projects. And we see a lot of interest in that direction.
Okay, Wouter has this.
Just switching chairs. I had a question. Your project, it sort of fits in a tradition or a history of projects that are hugely idealistic, where the project itself is kind of a portrait of an ideal society. But what you also see with such projects in the history of architecture is that once the first generation or the second generation has either moved out or has grown old or has died, etc., and then the project becomes more normal. So the relationship to the project becomes more, you could say, more transactional. So the collective spaces become commercial spaces. The contracts become normal rental contracts or even buying contracts. Would you see that as a failure or as a normal development for your building if it, let's say, in 20, 25 years becomes a quote normal apartment building with some commercial services and a very interesting architecture?
I wouldn't see it as a failure. First, I think our idea is to make cheap housing permanently available and to do it sustainably. And I think the way that we've set up our business model, but also our ownership model, that's going to be the case no matter what. Once the building stands, the energy performance is what it is. The building materials we've used is what it is. So the sustainability is kind of covered. We'll have achieved that anyway. Then I think second, we expect that and we hope that the communities within the building, let's say every group in the building as a whole also, so every floor in the building as a whole, because it's designed for social interaction, we hope that there's a little bit more of a social mechanism to really keep this type of collective living alive, and to keep kind of this type of community in there just through social checks and balances. But even if the composition of those groups changes a little bit and differs from the type of people that we have envisioning living there now, that's fine, as long as this provides a nice and affordable and sustainable way of living for people. That's really great. And I do think that the way that we've designed it is different from other projects that we've seen, because we actually visited quite a few projects before we did the design ourselves, and we've seen exactly the type of development that you're sketching now, where there's a little bit less social cohesion and just more like normal renting, let's say, going on in apartment blocks that have initially been set up with a very big collective function. I do think that our design is so extreme in emphasizing these type of social interactions that there's less risk for it. We actually have over a third of the building completely dedicated to collective functions, and I haven't seen anything like that in any of the other projects that we visited. So I have good hopes that it'll stay really as a collective and socially cohesive type of community, even a little bit further into the future.
Yeah, so also the architectural design plays a role in the continuation of this concept.
Yeah, very much so.
I would like to go to the second example of alternative forms of housing, which this one is found right here
in Rotterdam with het Rotterdamse Woongenootschap. Architect, member and initiator Arie Lenkeek will share his experiences. Arie Lenkeek works as an independent curator and program maker, and his motive is to develop new common grounds as training places for the city of tomorrow. I guess training places, testing sites, sort of?
Maybe. There's some exercise also in my presentation, so you'll see what I mean with training.
Good. And with a focus on integrating cultural values, economic drivers and social fabric. Wow. I guess this is your own words. He wrote the pamphlet Operation Housing Cooperation to advocate for cooperative housing as the third pillar in a just and inclusive urban development, as we have also been talking about in the first hour. So go ahead.
Thank you. Nice to mention also the pamphlet Operatie Wooncoöperatie, because I'm happy that we can announce that we've been granted the subsidy to work it into a publication, so there will be more.
Congratulations.
Yes, so that's good news. I can switch here, but where can I see what you see? Here.
Yeah, over there.
Okay, good. So, dear audience, well, het Rotterdams Woongenootschap. It's funny to speak after the presentation of the Warren, because for us, we're in a quite different city, but also in a different situation. So for us, we don't have to beat around the bush. If we want to talk about the realities of het Rotterdams Woongenootschap, we know and have articulated from the start that any initiative wanting to acquire a place in the Dutch housing market beyond the categories that we already know must have 1, access to money, 2, access to land, and 3, acceptance as an agent. Because without access to initial investment money, it's hard to be an autonomous commissioner. Without access to land, it's hard to be anything but a group of dreamers, of course. And without acceptance as agents, which is maybe not phrased well, but let's see, it's hard to be a third party investing in the common good in the longer run, when there's no understanding and acceptance of this in the system, the ones you have to deal with. One could call this third also access to decision making. So these three will be the compass to guide you through what we have seen in the past years and where we are now with het Rotterdams Woongenootschap. It's a brief history of our attempts to lay the foundations for a housing cooperative in Rotterdam. Peter Kuenzli, who opened this day, already introduced the urgencies and the inspirations that are behind our initiative. For us, it's a process of social and institutional innovation as well, since we think organizing this project has not only will result in a built housing complex here in Rotterdam, but we hope it will also make it much more normal in the Netherlands, at least. It started in 2016 with Nienke, who will speak later this day as well, who was amazed at the quality and affordability of housing in Zurich, which appeared to be related to the re-emergence of the housing co-ops. She took it up to address this question, what it would mean to introduce the housing cooperatives in the Netherlands. We are not a typical citizens initiative, a group of friends or acquaintances. We set ourselves a goal which combines the realization of real estate with the normalization of the housing cooperative in the Dutch housing market. So for us, it's not only a real estate development adventure, it's a process of renewal and innovation as well. Therefore, we think it's important to be precise in your definitions and in declaring who you are. As we see it, a housing cooperative, as we work on it, is an autonomous organization of persons who unite voluntarily to promote their common housing needs and aspirations by means of a not-for-profit enterprise, which is owned and controlled democratically by its members. We follow the definition of the International Cooperative Alliance with this. So we translate this to the mission and goal of het Rotterdams Woongenootschap. It appears to be hanging.
Mine.
Mine? You do it next? Yeah? Okay. The aim of our housing cooperative is to provide its members with attractive and affordable housing and business accommodation on a sustainable basis. We strive to offer housing and associated facilities to all population groups, but we focus on households with children because they really fall between the wal and het schip in the Netherlands, so we're fundamentally open to everyone. The cooperative association has no profit motive. We translated this to a target, 100 to 200 dwellings in one or more central locations here in the city, full ownership by the cooperative HRW, membership open to anyone. You deposit a membership share once you when you get an apartment, you deposit extra shares for the housing. Rent is calculated on cost basis between 750 and maximum 1,200 per month. For units between 50 and 90 square meters. And as we said, there is no speculation, rent seeking or investment on increased value. So to ensure these characteristics, we devised a quite atypical sort of statutes for the cooperative association. The Dutch normal statutes are very matter-of-factly and dry. We start with a set of principles that provide the spirit of the enterprise. For instance, indicating how we approach mobility, assignment of apartments according to the size of the household, the equivalence of different apartments. It severs an eventual cashing out by selling the property. This cannot be ruled out completely, but it stipulates that if this will happen eventually, any excess capital remaining after selling should be transferred back to the city of Rotterdam, aimed at the provision of affordable housing, which is important for us. So, for the financing of the shared enterprise, we follow more or less the model that you have also seen with the Warren. So it's 70% that can be mortgaged, 30% that must be financed otherwise, with 10% from the members and 20% like what we call private equity. It's important that ownership guarantees continuity and democratic control, and also what's important here is that operations are done on cost basis. So we decided on a very limited increase in rent only following the real increase of prices, the risks are manageable, the long-term affordability is guaranteed. So with all these things in place, we were able to arrange with the city for a plot of land on the Lloyd Pier in 2018, followed suit by 2 housing corporations that also agreed to work with us on 2 of their locations. So we had access to land, at least options on the development opportunities, and that proved the foundation for us to establish the Cooperative Housing Association HRW in 2018 as well. Anyone could become a member. However, we focus on the middle income classes and the apartments for families. So affordable, but with a decent size. Now, let's delve a little bit deeper into what we seek. First, for us, affordability is something that starts today, but is of importance on the long run. Our rents are related to real costs and only increase with the increase of these costs. What this means, compared to what we see in investor-owned affordable housing on the longer run, is indicated in this 50-year graph, in which you see the baseline is the HRW, and if you take the increase of 1.25 plus 3.25%, which is quite average now, you have the red line which quadruples in 50 years the rents. For the qualities we want to realize in our buildings, it's important to understand that we see a very economic basic ground plan, which can be achieved by sharing functions you don't need on a daily basis. Houses are rented out totally finished, no new kitchens and bathrooms with every new inhabitant. That's sustainable, it's flexible, it allows also the allocation of apartments according to household dynamics. It's also coherent with the fact that members have their capital share of 10% done already. We speak of daylight, hours of sun exposure, flexible use during the hours of the day, living space that includes the quality of balconies, outdoor spaces. The stages between the street and private space are considered as a kind of script, a sequence for coming home, for being together. The space for corridors and stairs are not just that, but are also thought of as spaces for encounter. Like here. Functions you don't need on a daily basis are taken together and provided collectively. Laundry, but also guest rooms, storage, and of course the diverse forms of mobility, which probably will always be a chaos as we see here. And adaptable shared spaces. If we want a painting atelier, it's there. If our children prevent us from finding time to paint, we'll turn it into a youth den. This is what you see here. I like it. So not a standard middle of the road, one size fits all apartment, but a variety of formats for living. This slide shows the array that can be found in coöperation, which is huge, a Swiss project, which will definitely be referred to later today as well. So we will not be that extreme, but our spaces range from self-sustaining guest rooms to the Germanism of what we say the grootwoning, an arrangement of 4 to 6 self-sustaining apartments around a shared living space. The locations should be well connected to public transport, urban facilities, allowing our strict principles of refraining from individual car use. And these 3 locations, in the meantime, reduced to 2, which provide the ground for the first projects. Currently, we are working on Odeon, Central City, West Side, adjacent to Wijkpark Oude Westen, a location owned partly by the city and partly by Woonstad Rotterdam, the Housing Corporation. We developed together with them the concept of 2 urban apartment blocks, one for the social housing sector, one for het Rotterdams Woongenootschap, containing each about 45 apartments. This is not exactly what it's now, but there is already something that's going to be demolished, and this will be the result, we hope. The other location is with Corporation Havensteder, offering us the opportunity to develop plans in Krooswijk, the northeast of the city, consisting of 2 locations on a stone's throw distance from each other, with a, what we say, temporary sport facility on the biggest plot. Also here, around 50 apartments could be provided on the bigger location and some 20 on the smaller location. Although part of the plot is already vacant, it's still not clear when the sports hall will be removed. It's a function which is still very much needed. So these small remarks on the sports hall bring us to the third part of my introduction. We started 3 years ago. We were able to develop plans for concrete locations, and still we're not able to tell when we will start construction or expect to have a festive opening. Let me take you through the workout we've been doing for 3 years now. Therefore, we start with this nice image of what we call, is it there? Yes, there it is, the homo cooperans, the person that wants to start a housing cooperative. He has to stay in shape while doing his exercises of stretching to the max. It starts with a dream. The ideas that are formulated as the brief, the programma van eisen. That's complemented with the second corner, the amount of rent per month that is regarded as possible or reasonable. The third corner is the costs of construction, not only the direct costs for construction, but also the cost for the land, cost for advisors, architects, organization, insurance, and so on, and so on. And finally, the fourth, the financing, the percentage of the rent is of course very important there. With these four, a plan and a business case can be brought together if it's not approached as a free market development, but understood by all partners as a joint effort to provide affordable housing. Now, brace for some exercise to explore how these four corners are interdependent from each other. For the overview, these are very small in the left corner. If you want to follow my calculation, it's there. So for the overview, let's assume a building of 50 apartments of 70 square meters. Let's say we want the rent to be 900 euros per month, neatly according to the municipal standard here for middle rent. That comes down to 12, 13 euros per square meter per month. So for financing, it's good to know that the interest and repayment will determine approximately 80% of this monthly rent, as you've also seen in the graph of the Warren. On the side of the total costs, the stichtingskost on the right, the most important button here is determined by the construction costs. In the past 3 years, these costs have increased by around 25%, and the end is not yet in sight. That means that now you get 25% less building for your money. So a house of 70 square meters from 3 years ago has now shrunk to 55 meters. On the other hand, the interest on financing has fallen also sharply. A bank sees a cooperative as a business, and financing for a business cannot be compared to mortgage rates for individual consumers. The current rate is around 2.5 to 2%. If you realize that the financing costs determine about 80% of the rent, you will understand that this button for the affordability of the houses will have a much stronger effect than the construction costs will. So let's breathe out. The construction costs are predictable. We keep the apartments 70 square meters. On top of that, so 8 to 12%. So another 25% will be added to the construction costs, and on top of that, there will come the land costs. The value for the land is usually determined according to the residual method. The valuation to market value determines the price per square meter. The total costs are deducted from this appraised value, and the difference is considered to be the land value. Because this sum is so simple, it's tempting to think it's true. But for social housing, a fixed standard amount is used. And with a long-term lease canon, the land value is also calculated differently. For the residual land value, you could use also a different starting point than the market value. What is the rental income that the building can realize as an affordable cooperative housing project, and what does it cost to build? The difference between those two is the social land value. What you consider to be a fixed standard is not the value at free sale in the market, but the value at the specific destination withdrawn from the market. So how does the investment of a cooperative relate to the investment of an investor? Then it is important to look at the rental value. In our calculation example, we calculated with 13 euro per square meter per month for a whole year. It means 13 or 12.86 times 70 square meters times 50 homes times 12 months, it's around 530,000 euros per year. An investor calculates his investment value via the gross initial return. The return of year one divided over the total investment. Een bar, bruto aanvangsrendement, is de boeventaal die hiervoor in het Nederlands gebruikt wordt. With a bar of 4%, this is therefore an investment value of around 13.5 million. But this is with cooperative rent level. In the market, the average in Rotterdam is 19 euro per square meter per month. So the same sum then yields to a rental value of 789,000 and an investment value of 19.9 million. Not to mention the 14% extra return that can be booked as exit yields when you sell after 15 years. So these are the forces of the free market at short notice, and the force field in which the cooperative being has to stay in shape despite its stretching and stretching. Everybody benefits from real estate. The municipality through its land, developers through their expertise and the profit and risk they charge, an investor through the expected returns after 15 years. The cooperative model seeks a different playing field, or I should say, a cooperative model cannot be achieved as long as it is forced to function under the conditions of the free market. It's simply not competing. The calculations of the real estate, the short-term benefits and the short-term benefits are simply too strong. So that's why it's important to focus on this access to money, access to land and acceptance as agents. So regarding autonomy, since we as Rotterdam's Woongenootschap don't possess the means and financial leverage to develop the project, which amounts like 10% of the total cost of construction, we had to connect with a development partner. Our first location on the Lloyd Pier with a commercial developer, where we came to the point where a higher land price was regarded necessary by the city, who then proposed to cut the project in two parts. One for the free market with higher revenues, also bringing up a higher land price. In the second example, the Odeon location, the total project will be developed by the Housing Corporation and will be bought upon completion by het Rotterdam's Woongenootschap. And in Krooswijk, we work with a construction similar as the first project, but learning from its pitfalls. A small dedicated investor slash developer slash constructor will develop the whole project and take part of it, the smallest part, for the free market rental housing. If there would be a fund to provide these initial costs for us, it would be free. It would free the cooperative from this catch-as-can game with a partner, where the fallback scenario is always much more attractive than the scenario of working with and for a cooperative. Regarding the land, we found ourselves in a kind of Groundhog Day scenario in which the negotiations with the city on the price of the land or the possibility of land lease instead is recurring. Maarten van Poelgeest also strongly advocated this idea of leasing the land, but in Rotterdam we're not ready to adopt this idea back again, apparently. Rotterdam struggles with its holy principle of market conformity in establishing a price for the land. As long as this is not adapted to the fundamental characteristics of cooperative housing, it will remain a dream that ends with another Groundhog Day again. And this is related to my third point, commoning. As long as the city administration and its policies don't distinguish clearly the nature of cooperative housing, it will not flourish. We have deeply embedded and guaranteed the nature of affordable housing as a common good in our statutes, in our model of exploitation, in everything that we do. But we have to convince the city officials time and again, since their frame of reference is related to the logic of investors or collective commissioning projects, at best CPO projecten. Cities are taking measures to include housing cooperative as their allies in providing affordable housing with, by and for residents. Amsterdam is making room for cooperatives as a third pillar in the housing market. Rotterdam is up to this day half-hearted, a little bit half-hearted. We hope this day contributes in our city also to taking the consequences and embrace the opportunities for cooperative houses. Thank you.
Thanks, I. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, so which are the decisive, oh. Ready? I wanted to ask you what factors are the decisive factors in this process that has been taking for, well, 3 years already, but if I summarize it well, it's the fund for the initial phase, which needs to be there somehow. It's the land price negotiations, and is the acceptance of the necessity by the municipal authorities of this third building sector. Those are the three really big obstacles that need to be overcome. I wanted to ask you just some small facts. How many members do you have as a housing corporation?
Today we have between 40 and 50 people who are actually members. We have a quite larger group of people who are interested but have not yet taken the step of becoming a member, which is understandable because we don't have a project yet.
Mm-hmm. And what would be the ideal size for a housing corporation?
Well, we said it would be around 100 to 200 housing units would be good, given the opportunity not only, of course, to have your own administration, etc., covered.
Mm-hmm.
So the more units you have, the cheaper it becomes, but also because this idea of sharing facilities, if you share guest rooms in an apartment block of 50, it's easier to do that than in an apartment block of 20. So we said, if we want to start with a big project, 100 to 200 would be the ideal size for that.
Would there also be a maximum to the size, after which you probably lose the sort of synergy in a group?
I don't think there would be a maximum to the size, because it's also always easy to adapt what you want to organize with the group you're with to the scale where you're at. So you saw the grootwoning, which is an example where there will be a group of people who have one contract and they can decide how they divide the rent and how they use the shared space. So they're a kind of group within the corporation. Each project will also have its own arrangements for its residents, but we say it's important that also these different projects in Rotterdam are part of the same housing cooperative at Rotterdam.
Yeah. So I could imagine that in these times of flexibilization of labor and of insecurity about financial future, that a lot of people find the lack of increase in value also an obstacle to becoming part of such a cooperation.
Yeah, it's of course, that's also a question we often get, and I think it really is related to the frame that everybody is caught in, that there will be an everlasting increase in the value of your real estate. What is the other side? When you have a guaranteed stable rent, which will not increase, and eventually it's possible to lower the rent, maybe even. That would be on the long term. That would be a real option. So it allows you to organize your savings in a different way. It's a way also the flexibility of your house. When my family either shrinks or increases in size, it's hard to move to a place that fits the size of my family. This flexibility is what you regain when you are part of a cooperative.
Yeah.
So. Basically I think the whole idea that housing is also something which has to do with harvesting something which you don't sow, we should also adapt that as users. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for now.
Okay.
Like Gerard said, we have a lot of flavors of housing corporations, and I would like to turn now to a third example which we have in in the housing corporations. And I would like to ask the co-founder of City in the Making, which is also, or was also, right around the corner here in Rotterdam, to share his experiences with co-housing and also with other unconventional programming of urban property. Here's your remote control. And this is Piet Vollaert, who was trained as an architect at the TU Delft, but he greatly widened his scope, I should say. He was the co-founder and director of Archinet, the architectural website of the Netherlands. And he now works as an architect, an architecture critic, but mostly as an urban activist and a promoter of nature-inclusive design and urban nature. So, Piet, Stad in de Maak, City in the Making, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, I just realized hearing these two adventures of both the Warren and the Rotterdam's Woongenootschap that we have been in a fortunate position that we've been able to, for 7 years already, experiment with what it is like to live and work in a cooperative. And this came about because we, in 2013, we were offered to manage two empty buildings owned by the housing corporation Havenstede for 10 years for free, to basically do anything we'd like with that. Here you see them from the facade. Actually, when we came there, it was totally boarded up. And that was the main reason for Havenstede actually to offer it to them, because at that time, in the middle of the crisis, they didn't have the, let's say, the money or even the willingness to invest in new buildings. So it would have been boarded up normally, but this was an alternative for them for us. And we restored the ground floor, by the way, so it didn't look like that when we came there. And actually, we used the building sort of as found. So the structure and the topology of the building became the structure and the topology of our use. So these workshops, which were on the ground floor, they were transformed into communal spaces in commons spaces, whilst the top floors, the two top floors, which were 4 apartments in themselves, were used for living. Here you'll see sort of what this living could be like. It was a very shitty condition when we came there, and these are all these conditions have been improved by the people who live there themselves, almost totally from reused materials or given stuff and things like that. Whilst these ground floors, these common spaces were the most interesting for us because as architects we had already been into the international discussions about commons and commoning, and this was an opportunity for us to experiment with what this could be like. And so these spaces are given for free for our own inhabitants, but also for the people in the street, and they have seen all kinds of uses. One very important one is the wood workshop, which we needed ourselves, you could say, but which is now also run by somebody who's living there and is also used by people in the street. But there have been shared washing facilities, there's a cinema once every week, we have dinners and meetings, and in general it has seen a lot of use, even a small beer brewery for a while. It's not only buildings that we are interested in commoning, it's actually also the access to public space. And here you see 2 examples of that. And the bottom left is one of the buildings we manage, which had next to it was a strip of unused public greenery. We put up a fence, we put in a more or less stolen container from the municipality, and then called it an allotment garden. And since then, it has been used mainly by the people living around the area indeed as an allotment garden. And we did something similar in Almondestraat, where as a small homage to the Prinsessine garden in Berlin, we have made a nomadic vegetable garden, which can be taken with us when we move. Okay. Well, there are some, that slide just says principles. There are some, let's say, 3 main principles of the way we are working. And one of them I already mentioned is commons and commoning, which basically is the sharing of a resource by a specific group of people. So, and that's the main difference between, let's say, the public space and the common space, is that it is for a specific group of people. And although the edges may be permeable, it may be vague, it is still this idea that it is for a specific group of people, like, for instance, people living in a co-housing project, is core to that business. And we've already heard also this triangle of state versus capital, government versus market, and already in the commons discussions from the 70s, this triangle has been a core. And to say that there's a third force, and that is the community. And that is what we try to do, is to let's say, operate from the community for the community. There has been some other values too. Self-reliance is really basic for us. We, for our core business of, let's say, using the buildings, we do not want to have any subsidy whatsoever. We want to stand on our own. For that, we think that is very important. We try to experiment with what it would be like in a sharing economy, and mainly we try to learn by what we are doing. And in that sense, we see these buildings, which are temporary, for although it's quite a long time, it's 5 to 10 years, but still they are temporary. We see that as a training ground for a more permanent way of living like this. And the third principle is, let's say, that we try to be as flat as an organization as possible and as democratic as possible. And for that, we are now using the sociocratic governance model. It is actually, that has been here for quite a while, since the 1920s actually. But recently it's come to the fore again for companies too, who tried, and businesses who try to be, let's say, reorganize their business, and also IT businesses, for instance. And we use it because it is very interesting to see how the sociocratic model, Google it if you want to, because it's too little time to explain really, but the main point is that it has distributed and bottom up, that is organized in circles and tasks, responsibilities, which report to a main council, you could say. And that decision making is by consent. While this was going on, this temporary use, quite immediately almost we thought, well, okay, we must go beyond this temporarity, and the only thing to do that is to buy property and to keep it there forever. So we've had our adventures in the real estate market for some 5 years now, and that started really by being the co-founders of Vrijkoop, which is the Dutch sister organization of the Mietshuis Syndicate. I will present later on, so I'm not going to go into that. And it is interesting that the Belgian architects Dogma, they, for instance, made an ideal Mietshuis villa, which could also be seen as an ideal co-housing project. Which you see in the plan in the middle of the image is that around the central core with shared facilities, you have these relatively small micro apartments of the individual members. And that is basically, I think, what it is about. And what you see in the bottom is there are many realized projects outside of the Netherlands, and this is just one, La Borda in Barcelona. Again, about 70, I believe, apartments in different size, with a lot of shared space in between. So these are our, let's say, our bits of the last couple of years. It started out maybe 4 years ago already of a totally dysfunctional former homeless facility, We were outbid there, and we bid on 2 schools by the municipality. We were outbid there. We bid on a corner of a shopping street in our area with 4 buildings that needed to be renovated but were actually totally shit. We were outbid there. So in short, we failed every time. And the reasons for this failure, and we've heard it from other presentations too, first of all, is of course, there's no competing against the market forces in a booming housing time. So the only solution to that would be to wait for a next crisis. But my suspicion is that this crisis in housing real estate will not come. It may come in retail and offices, but not in housing. The shortage is too much for that at the moment. There is also this lack of understanding by municipalities and housing corporations from which we try to buy this thing. The only solution to that is to educate them. We're doing our best to that. But I must say there's also, let's say, a lack of political instruments and judicial instruments and guidelines in order to be able for the government to deal with that. So for that we should, let's say, lobby for a change in that. We've also heard about land prices a lot this morning already. And actually, it is, according to us, the most important reason why it is so difficult to buy a plant. If you look at the diagram, you'll see that the red line, which is the building cost, while the blue line is the cost of an average house to buy. And of course, the difference between the blue and the red line is the price of land, which is the same, the profits of speculation that are there. And we've heard solutions too, and yes, sure, we also think that government should stop selling its publicly owned land and try to again give them out in long leases in erfpacht. There's also a possibility of social funding, but we ourselves think that the best solution would be to again take matters in your own hand and start a community land trust, which is basically a trust fund that buys land and, let's say, gives it back to for social or co-housing projects, more like the erfpacht and replacing the position of the municipality before. And we are trying now to set up such a community land trust in Rotterdam. Meanwhile, while we did all this bidding and Googling with Excel, in the real world, about 2 years ago, one of the directors of Havenstede, from which we had all these temporary buildings, said, well, you know, guys, 5 years ago we had a problem and you were the solution, but the problem is gone. The corporations were starting to invest again in new buildings. And so we said, okay, what's your problem now then? And he said, well, you know that we are now building, and to create space for that we need to demolish some of our old stock. And in the process of transition between this old stock and newly built, that takes about 2 years' time. And we would rather have a solution that is not boarding it up once each individual house is been vacant. So, okay, do you have such a street, we asked, and yes, they had, right across their office building mainly, which was the Elmondestraat. 52 social apartments, they need to be demolished because both foundation and the facade is really beyond repair. And there will be social housing back, not on the same spot, but 1 street further. And we've tried, although for a very short time, to now scale up our stad in de maak method to this 52, to this full street. Here you see a timeline of what happened there. First of all, we had to deal with old inhabitants moving out. That was first for us. Before that, we had empty buildings we could enter. And you see this purple line, how gradually over a period of 1.5 years they left the street. And whilst they were leaving, we were entering. It's the blue line of new inhabitants. And there was, of course, again, this 1/3, 2/3 rule. So 2/3 for living and housing and 1/3 for common facilities. So these blue lines, you see on the bottom of the graph, are all these initiatives and common spaces that entered the building whilst they were vacated by old inhabitants. Now here you see our main target group for living there, which we called urban nomads, because this extreme short time for which this street was available, we couldn't not do what we normally do, is let's say normal living. So these are people who are living there for 3 to 6 months, and they are a very diverse group from expats, students, artists, but also former homeless people, people who are in a divorce situation and need a little break, things like that. And we found also that this group, which is totally invisible in the housing allocation system, is quite large. We've never have to advertise for a vacant space. They just came to us and in large numbers, I must say. Besides, let's say, these people who are living for 3 to 6 months in an apartment, quite often with two or three of them, we also have a real boarding house facility in a couple of these houses, and there we rent out rooms to people for a period of 1 week to a maximum of 2 months. And 3 of these former bedrooms share the living room of the apartment and the kitchen, so it's a small community in itself, you could say. And these rooms are furnished with stuff that old people who were left behind, and only the sheets and the mattresses are new, and the rest of it is mostly done by artists or ourselves. And I must say, at the moment, it's almost like a boutique hotel with the prices of a hostel. So then there's, what is really important here is the free space we gave to neighborhood initiatives. Here you see 4 of them. I just heard that I have little time left, so you visit our website and you can see what they are. We have also, besides these spaces we give away for free to neighborhood initiatives, we have our own shared spaces. There are many of them, from a living room for meeting, bookshop, reception, a blank space which we can use everywhere. We have, of course, shared facilities, and also, which is good to mention, there's one Heimwehwoning, homesickness house, which is a small museum of the history of the street, but also a place where old inhabitants can return to their street for 1 night if they get homesick. So here's a diagram of the distribution of these facilities along the street. The blue-green on the bottom are these initiatives that came from outside and are given free spacing, and the yellow ones are the collective provisions that came from the inhabitants. Of course, there's a lot of partying going on and cultural activities. One that should be mentioned is leegstandsproza, which translates as vacancy prose. When last year, when all inhabitants were leaving out, 6 authors from Belgium, young authors from Belgium and the Netherlands, came to live for 1 week with one of the people who were living in the street, and at the end of this week they produced together a short story which was then presented in our living room, and since has also been traveling through Belgium and Europe as a sort of a literary tour. And the last and final cultural activity has been a street opera 2 weeks ago. So the audience sitting in the street in Corona distance, with the stage on the playground in our street and balconies for the choir and the actors. During Corona times, the community proved also if a strong community proves also to be very resilient and able to act quickly, because within a week we already of the lockdown, we already had set up a distribution system for shopping and food, mostly for the elderly in the area. And a couple of weeks after the beginning, we already had 100 or 150 addresses for which we brought these things. So yeah, but demolition is nearing. So now what? One idea would be to, let's say, take up this whole nomadic, this whole community of nomads and become nomadic ourselves as a street. So move from demolition street to demolition street and temporary use at the same time. The other is, of course, to keep on trying to find a permanent spot and to bid on projects, on houses for co-ops. And if all that fails, that we can always squat. I can't wait, actually. Just two final ideas. First of all, we are architects, and often we are asked, oh, okay, nice, but is it architecture? And I always answer with a quote from my hero, Cedric Price, that the art of architecture is to enable. So not to make, but to make possible. And what we are trying to do is, although we are not without, let's say, some sort of an aesthetic feel, albeit maybe a squatter aesthetics, we try to, especially to enable others to make their own space and produce their own space. And another question is, nice, but is it political? Well, to be honest, in the beginning we try to keep under the radar as much as possible and try to not engage with the government at all. Most of the things we do are semi-legal, so it's best not to wake up sleeping dogs, as we say in Dutch. But of course, when you try to buy property, then there's no, and when you try to take back housing, there's no other way but to become political ourselves. So, although it may be a little bit difficult for pragmatic anarchists that we are and who like to do rather than to talk, we need to become political. And it's interesting, this drawing you see there on the left, which is hanging in our office. It was made by Carlijn Kingma. In the middle shows the Babylonian Tower of Modernity, and two ways out, two fields out of that state capital complex. One to the right is the rational, maybe even populist field that we all know. And to the left is the more chaotic, maybe romantic field in which we find ourselves. Here's a detail of that. You can see our own building in the middle of this bottom left detail. A lot of Rotterdam references around it. And it is nice that this is hanging above in my office, because it is a constant reminder that politically we need to stay as far left as we can, and we need to operate from the bottom always. Thank you. That was it.
Yeah. Thanks, Piet. Can we change chairs again?
Yeah.
And can I ask Arie and Gerard to join us again? I wanted to ask you a question, Piet, but by now I think I almost know the answer already, because we were talking about the different flavors of housing corporations, and it is clear that your project, City in the Making, has decisive cultural and even artistic, you could say maybe bohemian-like flavor. You were also talking about pragmatic anarchism, squatter aesthetics, about nomads and misfits, etc. If you would happen to conquer all obstacles and would get not a temporary but a permanent location, would this still be your background, would be the core of your project, or do you envision your project, City in the Making, also becoming more mainstream?
Well, the last thing, certainly not, or it would be without me. But the funny thing is that what we have been able to do is to, let's say, experiment with a group of people, with the community itself. And the idea that you have, if you want to live, that you've always combined this with working and cultural activities. This group was mainly artists, so then their work is, let's say, cultural. But there's also this furniture maker who is in one of our communities, and it's really a workshop. And this idea of a cooperative housing, which also includes economic spaces from which to be self-sufficient, was really core from the beginning. And I think we would always want to keep that in it. What we found out in the Almondestraat, that it is also possible to have these what we call orphaned community initiatives, to include them in your project too. And I think that was really the lesson from this last project. And I think that we would try, once we acquire a building, we would try to include that too. And in that sense, we may differ from the Warren and Rotterdam Woongenootschap. We want to be more than just a housing corporation for living. We want to be a community for working and living.
That brings me to one of the questions that was asked by the audience in the chat, who were interested to know how the housing co-ops have worked recently, and how especially the communal spaces have worked. Do they remain in use over time, and do people also feel safe using them?
During Corona times or in general?
I guess in general.
Let's first say, because we have a luxury there. You know, we get these buildings we've used are for free. So we can afford to not use them if nobody asks for it. And that is actually what happens. Sometimes for half a year they're unused spaces. But then somebody wants to do something and immediately he has the space to do that. And from that, this cinema, which has been going on for more than 2 years now, each Monday morning there's cinema, not now, but used to be before March. That was possible because the space was empty. So this emptiness of space is really important. So I'm not too afraid for unused collective spaces, really.
And how about Corona times? How did it develop then?
No, in Corona times, what we could see is that, especially in the Almondestraat, where there are 50 to 100 people, were already quite an established community, that the resilience of such a community, and it's lots of things I could not say, but immediately there was a care circle. There are some people who were calling everybody in all of the houses, are you still okay? No anxiety, things like that, you know. And that is really the main value of such communities, not only for the community itself, but also for the area, for the neighborhood. So what Peter Kuenzli said is really true. These housing cooperatives, even if they are not that cultural and social as we are, they are of value to the neighborhood too, because of their stable. Most of the people who live there are people but that by nature want to cooperate and do other kinds of community stuff. So they are really important to include them in your everyday neighborhood too. Yeah. Every neighborhood should have at least one cooperative housing project. Good. If only because of that.
Well, there was also a question on that that connects to this. That is a question for the Rotterdamse Woongenootschap. You put a focus merely on families. Is that not a little bit exclusive? Would it still work like this community factor in the neighborhood?
Yeah. Well, if you use the term families, I think it's a little bit confusing. So my apologies for that. If, on the other hand, if you look at what the current focus of, for instance, the policy here in Rotterdam on middeninkomen housing is, it's focused on households for 1 or 2 people. So that's what they say, that's the group we have. So they exclude the group of people who have bigger households, be it a daddy and a mommy and children, but it's also, of course, a lot of people who are living together or trying to find places to living together, which transcend that classic idea of what's
so
a family.
It's in a broader sense of
it's
the
in
word.
a much broader sense of the word. That's also what we experience when we, in conversation with our members, but also with people who are considering to become a member. This idea of the grootwoning, in which you live together but have your own private spaces, it's more or less also what you showed. It's really something that appeals to people that say, okay, I can see myself living there because I want to take care of my parents when they need it, or I see that we can be a kind of foster family for refugee families who are starting to live here. So those kind of new social ties are really needed. And if you search for a place for that in what is currently built new in the city, well, you won't find it.
So do you think, also another question, do you think that these kind of co-ops are also a way out for people who are looking to combine housing with care?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think also if you look now around the Netherlands, what are the communities that are organizing themselves? It's, for instance, this Knarrenhof, which is all over the country blooming now. I think that really shows that this group of people who are growing towards the situation in which they need care are already, well, exercising how to live together already.
You could also say that caring is, let's say, of course, part of this whole idea of living cooperatively, collectively. And care, even if it's not about, let's say, people who are sick or old or whatever, there's always care for each other.
Yeah,
in these
they
kinds
could also
of
be
groups.
young and lonely, or
And also the idea of care is also very much, originally it was referred to like care is what the family does. But this idea of commons, which says, okay, we have the state, we have the domain of the market, we have the domain of the families. But this idea of the commons, once you find care also in that, I think what your stories about what happened after Corona is really a good example of that.
And it's actually, it's also a family. It's an extended family.
Yeah.
And it's not that much difference.
No, I think with this we should probably end this session. What I think is interesting is that these were three very different examples, but this element of the commons, of the common space, of the collective, that's what they all share. And that goes for your two projects, but also for the Warren. And so we get a very sharp idea of what is essential for these housing corporations and what they can offer.
Differ from normal social housing.
Yes, yeah. So thank you, Gerard and Arie and Piet. Thank you also to the viewers at home for being with us during this second part of the conference, Taking Back Housing. We'll return in a bit, a little bit later than we planned, at 1:30, because we're a little bit late already. 1:30, we'll continue with the third part of this symposium with inspiration from abroad, this time from Germany and Switzerland. And don't forget, for this afternoon program, you can switch to the second link that you have received from us through email. See you then.
Thank you.
Okay.